Merlin. Ever heard a wizard scream, "Merlin's beard," and wondered who the heck Merlin actually was? Because the films definitely weren't going to tell you. 8 movies and the most famous wizard in history never got a single scene. He was known as the Prince of Enchanters, a charm specialist so talented that the wizarding world literally named its highest award after him. He attended Hogwarts as part of one of its earliest generations, meaning Salazar Slytherin himself probably taught him. And yes, Merlin was a Slytherin. He proved himself a gifted seer while still a student, mastered ancient magic that most modern wizards can't even identify, and went on to establish rules preventing witches and wizards from using magic against muggles, centuries before the Statute of Secrecy existed. After Hogwarts, he joined King Arthur's court, not as a myth, as an actual job, and founded the Order of Merlin, originally an organization fighting for Muggle rights. And the green ribbon on the award, legend says it was chosen to reflect his Hogwarts house, because even 1,000 years later, Slytherin keeps the receipts. Morgana Le Fay. She was one of the most powerful dark witches in recorded wizarding history. Medieval, politically motivated, operating at the highest levels of both the magical and Muggle worlds simultaneously. While Merlin sat at Arthur's court building laws to protect Muggles, Morgana built a kingdom. She became Queen of Avalon, according to legend one of the 9 enchantresses who governed the island, and the most dangerous of the group. She mastered the Animagus transformation centuries before the Ministry existed to regulate it, turning into a bird at will, healer, dark witch, and shapeshifter all in the same person. And at some point she challenged Merlin directly. The duel became so legendary that Hogwarts immortalized it in a stained glass window, right next to the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom. 1,000 years later, students still walk past it on the way to class. Linfred of Stinchcombe. This is the very first Potter. Harry's bloodline starts right here in a vegetable garden. Linfred lived in the village of Stinchcombe in Gloucestershire, where his Muggle neighbors thought it was just a harmless, absent-minded old man growing funny plants. They came to him for remedies when they were sick, and he always delivered. What they didn't know was that his cures were magical. Behind closed doors, he was inventing potions that would outlast him by centuries. Early versions of Skellygrow and Pepperup Potion, both still in use at Hogwarts today. His neighbors called him the Potterer. The nickname stuck, corrupted over time into Potter. That's the origin. That's where the name comes from. He had 7 children, left them all a significant pile of gold from potion sales, and his eldest son, Hardwin, married Iolanthe Peveril, daughter of Ignotus Peveril. She brought the invisibility cloak into the family. One marriage 8 centuries ago, and Harry's most important possession was secured. Nicolas Flamel. Most wizards in this universe are fictional characters, but Nicolas Flamel was a real person. He was a 14th century French alchemist who inspired Rowling to build an entire plot around his life's work. In the wizarding world, Flamel discovered the Philosopher's Stone somewhere in the medieval era, the only known object capable of producing the elixir of life, and simply kept going. He attended Beauxbatons, met Perronel there, and later funded the entire castle and grounds with alchemist gold. There's a fountain on the school's grounds still named after the couple. 665 years old, quietly settled in Devon with his wife, collaborating with Dumbledore on alchemy research between what appears to have been a great deal of opera, unhurried reading, and the kind of peaceful existence that only 6 centuries of practice can perfect. He even owned a phoenix embossed book that let him communicate with Dumbledore and other wizards across the world. Basically a magical group chat, 600 years before anyone else thought of it. During Grindelwald's rise, he fought alongside Newt Scamander and Dumbledore's allies, a 600-year-old alchemist joining a resistance movement because apparently retirement wasn't in the elixir's side effects. There's one theory that's hard not to believe. Flamel was the invisible king of the wizarding world for centuries, quietly pulling strings from behind the scenes. And Dumbledore's political power only existed because Flamel backed him, which would explain why Dumbledore's influence collapsed so fast after the stone was destroyed. Herpo the Foul. Every Horcrux in the series, the diary, the ring, the locket, the cup, all of it traces back to one person, an ancient Greek dark wizard whose name literally translates to creeping thing. He knew what what he was. Herpo invented the Horcrux, the concept of fragmenting your soul and hiding the pieces inside objects to cheat death. Voldemort didn't originate the idea. He spent decades refining someone else's worst work, treating ancient notes as a personal blueprint. The basilisk came from Herpo the Foul too, hatching a chicken's egg beneath a toad, which raises immediate questions about what the failed attempts looked like. The result was a snake capable of killing any living creature that met its gaze directly. Herpo was a parcel tongue, so he could control it. Everyone else just had to hope. Two inventions, both still causing problems 1,000 years later. Remarkable legacy for a man who never got a single second of screen time. Nagini. Everyone remembers the snake with the beautiful name. But do you know what her life looked like before Voldemort? She was a maledictus, born with a blood curse passed down through generations, one that let her transform into a serpent. In 1927 Paris, she performed at Circus Arcanus, a traveling freak show where she was forced to shift into a snake on stage for paying crowds. That's where she met Credence Barebone, another person the wizarding world had used and thrown away. They escaped the circus together, and she helped him search for his true identity. What neither of them knew at the time was that Credence was the son of Aberforth Dumbledore, Albus's brother, which made him one of the most valuable targets in the wizarding world. Grindelwald figured this out first and spent months manipulating Credence with promises about his true identity, all to turn him into a weapon against Dumbledore. At the rally in Paris, Credence walked straight into it. Nagini saw through every word, but she couldn't stop him from believing. She lost the one person she had, and ended up fighting alongside Newt Scamander and Dumbledore's allies instead, which means for a brief moment in wizarding history, Voldemort's future Horcrux was on the side of good. At some point after that, the curse completed. The woman disappeared. The snake remained, alone, unable to communicate with anyone, possibly for decades, until she wandered into an Albanian forest and met a bodiless dark wizard who appeared to speak her language. The rest of that story you already know. Salazar Slytherin. Salazar Slytherin was one of the greatest wizards of the medieval era, a Parseltongue, a pioneer of magical education, and one of the 4 founders of the most important institution in the wizarding world. Most people remember him for the house, the falling out with Gryffindor, and the secret chamber he built underneath the school with a basilisk inside, and instructions for his heir to finish what he started. Slytherin was also a skilled legilimens, reading minds on top of talking to snakes, and his wand was made of snakewood with a core of basilisk horn, probably from the very basilisk he left in the chamber. He used Parseltongue to put the creature into a deep sleep that prevented it from aging. 1,000 years of suspended animation, waiting for the right heir to wake it up. And remember Herpo the Foul, the wizard who invented both the basilisk and the Horcrux? Some believe Slytherin found Herpo's research and did the same thing, split his soul and placed it inside the snake. That would explain why it only obeyed his direct heir and ignored every other Parseltongue, including Harry. His locket survived for centuries, becoming one of Voldemort's Horcruxes. If the theory holds, Voldemort got the idea from his own ancestors' homework. Fleamont Potter. Remember that pile of gold in Harry's Gringotts vault? The one he stared at in disbelief on his very first visit? A man named Fleamont put most of it there. Fleamont Potter was Harry's grandfather, a wizard who got bullied mercilessly at Hogwarts for his name, and responded by becoming one of the best duelists in the school. After graduating, he invented Sleekeazy's hair potion. 2 drops tames even the most bothersome Barnet, and quadrupled the family fortune with it. Hermione actually used it for the Yule Ball, which is an irony the Potter family probably never anticipated. He married Euphemia, and for years they couldn't have children. They had completely given up hope when, late in life, she fell pregnant. James was their miracle, their only son, and they spoiled him accordingly. Both Fleamont and Euphemia lived long enough to see James marry Lily, but dragonpox took them within days of each other before Harry was born. Godric Gryffindor. Everyone knows Godric Gryffindor as the founder of the house, the man behind the Sorting Hat, and the wizard who gave his name to Godric's Hollow, where Harry was born and where Dumbledore Dumbledore grew up. The story goes Gryffindor and Slytherin were genuinely close friends before the split, well beyond colleagues building a school together. The falling out over Muggleborns ended a real relationship, which makes the whole story considerably worse. Now about the sword. Most people know it appears to worthy Gryffindors, but the backstory is wild. Gryffindor commissioned it from Goblin King Ragnarok I, who crafted it from pure silver with egg-sized rubies. When it was finished, Ragnarok loved it so much he sent goblins to steal it back, claiming Gryffindor had taken it from him. Gryffindor fought them off, bewitched the lot, and sent them back with a threat. The grudge never died. Goblins still considered the sword stolen property centuries later, and the dispute kicked off one of the Goblin rebellions. When Griphook demands the sword from Harry in Deathly Hallows, that's a 1,000-year-old argument. And here's the detail nobody connects. Every other founder's most prized relic was turned into a Horcrux. Slytherin's locket, Hufflepuff's cup, Ravenclaw's diadem. Gryffindor's relics were the only ones Voldemort never touched. The sword destroyed 3 Horcruxes and the hat delivered it every time. So, 3 founders' legacies were poisoned and the 4th one cleaned it up. Wendelin the Weird. She was a medieval witch who discovered that the flame-freezing charm turned fire into a gentle tickling sensation, and apparently enjoyed it so much that she kept coming back. Not 5 or 10 times, but 47. In various disguises, she let Muggle witch hunters catch her, tie her out to a stake, and light it up. They thought they were executing a dangerous sorceress. She was having the time of her life. Remember that essay Harry had to write for History of Magic in 3rd year? Witch burning in the 14th century was completely pointless. Discuss. Wendelin was the star example. The entire Muggle persecution of witches was, for anyone with a wand and basic charm knowledge, an inconvenience at worst, and a spa day at best. Wendelin just happened to treat it as a recurring appointment. There's even a misprinted chocolate frog card listing her total at 118. Whether that's an error or Wendelin simply went off the books is anyone's guess. Rowena Ravenclaw. Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure. She engraved those words on a diadem that would eventually destroy her family. Rowena was a Scottish witch, one of the 4 founders of Hogwarts, and by all accounts the most brilliant of the group. Her diadem was enchanted to enhance the wisdom of its wearer, and it worked. It also became the thing her daughter Helena could not stop thinking about. Helena grew up in her mother's shadow, and eventually the jealousy won. She stole the diadem and fled to Albania. Rowena never told the other founders, pretended she still had it, but the loss broke her. She fell fatally ill and on her deathbed sent the Bloody Baron, a man who had loved Helena for years, to bring her daughter home. He found her, but she refused. He killed her in a rage, then killed himself. Rowena died without her seeing Helena again. Both of them ended up as Hogwarts ghosts, the Grey Lady and the Bloody Baron, haunting the same corridors for 1,000 years. And centuries later, a young Tom Riddle charmed Helena into revealing where she'd hidden the diadem, and turned her mother's greatest creation into a Horcrux. Bathilda Bagshot. Most people remember Bathilda Bagshot as the unsettling old woman from Deathly Hallows. That's a terrible introduction to someone who shaped the entire century before it. She wrote a history of magic, the textbook every Hogwarts student has carried for decades, plus at least 10 other books on top of that. She was the most celebrated magical historian of the 20th century, a friend of Dumbledore since he was a teenager, and the only person in Godric's Hollow that Kendra Dumbledore would even speak to. She was also Gellert Grindelwald's great-aunt, the woman who introduced young Gellert to young Albus in the summer of 1899, unknowingly setting off the chain of events that ended with Ariana's death. And in the end, Voldemort killed her, used her death to create his final Horcrux, Nagini, and placed the snake inside her body as a trap for Harry. Adalbert Waffling. Every first year whoever walked into Diagon Alley bought his book, but almost none of them could tell you who he was. Adalbert Waffling was the father of magical theory, the wizard who formulated the fundamental laws of magic, the actual rules explaining why spells work the way they do. His textbook, Magical Theory, has been required reading at Hogwarts for generations. Every wand movement, every incantation, every piece of magic anyone has ever learned at that school rests on the framework he built. Dumbledore corresponded with him as a teenager, exchanging ideas about the nature of magic, which gives you some idea of the level this man was operating at. His first fundamental law, tamper with the deepest mysteries, the source of life, the essence of self, only if prepared for consequences of the most extreme and dangerous kind. And his surname literally means speaking vaguely at length. For the man who defined how magic works, that's either deeply ironic or the best inside joke in wizarding academia. Cleodna. She was the eldest daughter of the last druid of Ireland, a medieval witch who could transform into a seabird at will, sort of like Maui from Moana, but make it magical. And according to legend, could also turn herself into a wave. She kept 3 magical birds whose songs healed the sick, putting them to sleep and curing them in the process. She discovered the properties of moondew, a potion ingredient still in use centuries later. And her favorite hobby? Flying. In Irish mythology, Cleodna was a goddess of love and beauty from County Cork. Rowling pulled her straight out of Celtic folklore and dropped her into the wizarding world. A druidess, a healer, an animagus, and a potioner, all in one person. The kind of witch who would have made the entire Hogwarts faculty nervous, impressed, and completely unsure what to do with her. Hesper Starky. Ever wonder why Polyjuice Potion specifically requires fluxweed picked during a full moon? Someone had to figure that out. That someone was Hesper Starky. She spent her career studying how the phases of the moon affected potion brewing, and the results are embedded in practically every advanced recipe in the Hogwarts curriculum. Veritaserum needs a full moon cycle to mature. The Animagus potion requires a mandrake leaf soaked in moonlight for an entire month. Every time Snape wrote specific lunar conditions into his instructions, that was Starky's research at work. She was born in 1881, the same year as Dumbledore, and lived to 92, spending decades quietly proving that the moon wasn't just for werewolves and romantic atmosphere. Her portrait still hangs at Hogwarts, guarding a secret room, and her name is almost too perfect. Hesper comes from Hesperus, the ancient Greek evening star, a woman named after a star who spent her life studying the moon. Some things just align. Beedle the Bard. The entire plot of Deathly Hallows, the Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, the Cloak of Invisibility hinges on a children's bedtime story, and nobody ever stops to ask who wrote it. Beedle the Bard was a 15th century wizard from Yorkshire who wrote the most famous fairy tales in the wizarding world. For magical children, his stories are what Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty are for muggles. Every kid grows up hearing them. Ron was genuinely shocked that Hermione hadn't. The Wizard and the Hopping Pot, Babbity Rabbity and her Cackling Stump, The Fountain of Fair Fortune, all Beedle. He wrote everything in ancient runes, possibly to keep the stories out of muggle hands. What makes him remarkable is what the tales reveal about the man. He liked muggles, mistrusted dark magic, and believed the worst wizards weren't the ones with the darkest spells, but the ones with the most cruelty and arrogance. Essentially predicted Voldemort's entire personality flaw 500 years early. Dumbledore left his personal copy to Hermione in his will. The book changed everything. Bowman Wright. Before the golden snitch existed, Quidditch players chased a real bird, a golden snidget, and regularly crushed it to death mid-game. The wizarding world watched this happen for centuries before anyone decided to fix it. Bowman Wright did. He crafted a walnut-sized golden ball with silver wings that mimicked the snidget's speed, weight, and flight patterns exactly, without the part where a living creature died at the end. He called it the Golden Snitch, and it completed Quidditch as we know it. Every match in every film, every catch Harry ever made, every point Crumb scored at the World Cup, all built on one man's invention. The snitch also carries flesh memory. It remembers the first human who ever touched it. Makers wear gloves handling them for this exact reason, and that little detail is precisely why Dumbledore was able to hide the Resurrection Stone inside Harry's first snitch. It would only open for him. Wright is buried in Godric's Hollow, the same graveyard Harry visited while carrying a snitch with the Resurrection Stone hidden inside. Hengist of Woodcroft. You never saw Hengist of Woodcroft in a single Harry Potter film, but he's one of the most important wizards in British magical history. Every Hogwarts student owes him their favorite weekend trip. He was a medieval Hufflepuff, possibly taught by Helga Hufflepuff herself, who was driven out of his home in Gloucestershire by Muggle witch hunters. He fled north to Scotland, settled near Hogwarts, and founded what would become the only all-wizarding village in Britain. According to legend, the Three Broomsticks started out as his house. The pub where every student has had their first butterbeer began as a refugee shelter. A man who lost everything started over and built a community that has stood for 1,000 years. His bust still sits on the 4th floor of Hogwarts. His statue stands in the village he created, and his chocolate frog Hog card was one of the very first Harry ever collected, on that train ride with Ron. So a Hufflepuff built the place every student loves most, but that never gets mentioned enough. So yeah, these wizards were never fully explained, and neither were all 11 wizarding schools in Harry Potter. That's your next lesson here at Stickman Hogwarts. Click now before Beaubaton starts judging your posture.